This week I'm with Sean Barrett, and we have chosen to talk about character creation. That's something we've spoke about before, but everyone's got a different take on it. So, Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much. So, you chose to talk about characters. How much do you consider race and class to begin with?
Not much at first. At first, I look at background
Okay.
and I think of who my person was, and then I'd make the rest fit.
Is that every time you do that?
Yeah, usually. Unless it's a
Okay.
one shot. In that case, I just quickly put together a wizard because that's my fave.
Yeah. All right, you're a wizard guy. Okay. So, all right, then let's say you're making a character. Give me a rough idea of how you do it.
So obviously, I'll look through the background, see if I can find anything that fits, or if I have an idea in mind, and I will go from there. So, like, depending on the campaign, might be a farm boy, in which case I might go with Fisher or another generic one. If I'm a wizard, then I'll look at Scholar, but I might not use Scholar. That might just be my baseline, and then I will build up from that. It might even turn into, like, say, a Red Wizard Apprentice, and then I'll build it from there. At the moment, I'm playing an artificer, and the way I built that was, whose apprentice am I? Where do I live? Okay, I want to live in this town. That town is mostly populated by gnomes, so I'm a gnome, because that fits.
When you're making a character, do you need to know the campaign you're playing?
Not always.
No.
Sometimes I can go in with a character in mind, and then my background isn't always relevant, which is fine. Because obviously, if you're following a module, you can't always fit a character's background in.
Yeah, that's true. Do you consider alignment?
I try to. However, it's really hard in 5e, isn't it? It's not hugely relevant all the time.
Yeah, and also I quite like the idea of alignments changing over time. As a DM, I like to try and tempt my players to maybe play against type. So yeah, alignment is a bit of a question mark for me.
It can be.
Yeah. Do you ever go to the nitty-gritty of what's in your rucksack?
Depending on what I'm doing. So if I'm a fisherman, I really like having a fishing rod or a net, and I like to use the net as my weapon as well if I can.
Excellent.
Because obviously you incorporate it into your character. There was one character I wanted to play that my main thing was, right, how do I utilize a boomerang? And that was the premise. And I ended up making a ranger who was this Australian, and he was a beastmaster. It was awesome.
Well, that sounds like a really detailed way of doing it. I mean, I didn't even know there was a fisherman backstory.
Yeah, there's Fisher. I can't remember what book it's in.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a good way of doing it. So what about starting wealth? Because I know a lot of my players, they're not often new. And so it's a case of, do you just give them the equipment? Just say you pick A or you pick B, there's no point in giving them money and then presenting them with loads of tables of armor and stuff. How do you do it?
We use starting equipment. I got a group I've been playing with for years, and even now they get confused with if you start with this much gold and buying stuff, they get confused with that. So we don't entertain that.
Yeah. So do you DM for newbies a lot, or?
Not very often, no. I have done in the past, but like I say, I've got a consistent group now. As I say, I DM at work as well now. I've got the kids into it. Yeah.
Wow, what do you do for a job?
Work in residential care.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you give, obviously, backstory is a big thing for you. Do you give a much sway to appearance? Do you go that nitty-gritty?
Not always, not particularly. I think I prefer more doing the background. I will go on Hero Forge and make a character on there and use that as my art on Roll20, but that's probably about as far as I'll go.
Yeah. So you were creating a character just by flipping through the books and having inspiration that way?
Yeah. Absolutely. And using things that I've read in media like Percy Jackson, things like that.
Like what, Percy Jackson?
Yeah, for example, I might I might get a premise from that and be like, oh, that's cool. Obviously, you don't rip it because you can't do identical, but you can take a premise. My one that lasted longest is a life cleric. He's called Doc. I made him with the children at work when we first started playing on a Monday. It was walking. I had no idea what to expect when we went in because it was Adventures League. It was the first time we'd been. And my whole thing was, how do I keep the kids alive to make it fun?
Yeah.
So I just made a life cleric. He was called Doc, and he went for about 12 weeks, and then I've started DMing now because it got dead busy. But he was probably my longest running and my favourite.
I mean, life clerics are very solid build. I'm always saying newbies should start there. Bit of heal, bit of attack.
And it did really, really good.
Yeah, exactly. Multi-classing for you or not?
Again, it depends on where the story's driven.
Yeah.
And where it goes. Sometimes it can be multi-class, but not always.
When you're building a character, do you have to consider what other people have built, to fit in with the party? Or you
You don't have to in 5th ed. 5th ed is very flexible in the regard that you don't have to, but I like to. I don't like to say if there's a ranger, walk in with my ranger, especially if we're starting at level 1, because you're practically the same in everything that you can do. Even if you chose a few different spells, the premise of a level 1 character is the exact same.
Yeah. What are you playing right now?
An artificer.
Right. And there's different branches, isn't there? Some can make iron steel defenders, and so you make the guns.
No, I've gone out. Like an Iron Man.
Oh, is that artillerist?
Yeah, you're thinking of
yeah, we have one of those. I've seen twice now. Yeah, it's one of the classes I never really go looking at myself.
I hadn't, and then one of the boys at work was like, "I want to play as Iron Man." So we looked on YouTube at builds of how to make Iron Man like build in D&D, and I fell in love with the artificer.
Yeah. So what's his abilities?
For the armorer, it's basically to get in and out of armor is an action. So you can be wearing heavy armor, and it's just an action to get in and out of it. My gnome obviously has dark vision, but I've got goggles of night, so my vision is doubled. You can get enhanced defense as an infusion, so my armor class is boosted alongside a shield, so I've got a ridiculous armor class. And my strength is 8, but I've got armor of magical strength, so any strength saving throw I need to make, I've got 6 charges I can use over the period of a long rest, and you can use your intelligence modifier instead, which is obviously the main ability of the artificer.
That's excellent. Infusions, yeah. What exactly is an infusion?
It's basically you just enchant your equipment with magical energy and give it a bonus.
Flaws, do you have that in your character? Because I find that the most interesting thing. What's your flaw?
I love character flaws. So at the minute, my flaw is that nobody can make things as perfect as I can. And whenever anyone does anything or tries to make a plan, I will step in and try and correct them. Obviously, if the timing is right, I don't want to be rude as well as a player.
Yeah. Do you follow any other resources, to help your character build, or do you just purely pen and paper it?
I use D&D Beyond as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You find that good? You find that
I love D&D Beyond. I think it's great.
Do you subscribe?
I do, and I've got all the books on there, which makes it easier.
So, yeah, if you stop subscribing, does that mean you don't get the books anymore?
You get the books because you have to bear the books regardless. So when you subscribe, you can share with people the books that you've got if you get the higher subscription.
Yeah.
And if you get the lower subscription, then it's just how many characters you can make. It goes to unlimited from I think it's 5. I think you can make. I don't know.
Do you ever think about where your character's going to end up? Do you ever build thinking, well, at level 10 I'm going to get this and that's what I really want?
I do, yeah. Not always. Sometimes you just wing it and see where the story's going to lead. But with my artificer, I absolutely do want to get wings of winged boots, I think they're called. Okay. Magic item, you can replicate it, and then my suit can fly then. I want the shield infusion as well. I can't remember what that's called, but it's basically an energy shield that you can create, and I want that as well because it looks pretty cool.
What campaign are you playing that this is allowed and fits in?
We're doing Tyranny of Dragons.
Really? You've got Iron Man. Because I find flying characters can really rip a hole in the campaign.
I'm not level 10 yet. I'm level 4, so we're not there yet.
Okay. Where are you in the Tyranny of Dragons?
At the moment, we've just freed some prisoners from a camp.
Early. Yeah, I know where you are. So have you ever completely homebrewed a character?
I myself have never made a fully homebrewed character. I don't think I'd be able to balance it.
I'm quite happy to play completely random dice rolls. You know, when you roll the first die and it's definitely strength and the second die it's
I've played like that in one-shots and I do really like it. I liked playing a paladin who had really low dex and he had a limp. That was in a one-shot we did. It was great.
I find characters to be quite expendable. I don't fear characters that the rare times that I play them dying, Do you get attached to characters?
I do get attached to them, but at the same time, I don't cry if they die. I'll be like, oh no, please don't die. Please don't die. But when they die, I'm like, well, that's a shame. That's the end of your story, and I'll move on to the next character. But, I accept it's a game.
Do you make backup characters?
No, not until I have to.
You don't. So you don't have your next character in mind each time?
No, because I think once you start doing that, for me anyway, personally, I stop investing into the original and I'm like, oh, I want to play the next one.
So what's your next stages after background?
After background, I will then look at race and class.
Yeah. So and are you ticking them off? Sort of saying, no, I've not played that, I've not played that?
Yeah, sometimes. Like I say, if it's one that I need to quickly make, then I will make a wizard. But I've barely touched upon any of the martial classes. I think the only martial class I've played is fighter.
Okay, so what draws you to wizard?
It's just got so much to do, hasn't it? There's just all the utility. You can make a wizard at level 1 and just have 6 rituals, which I know sounds really stupid, but it's great.
Yeah. No, Wizard is strong. It's just that obviously the AC is sometimes a problem starting out.
It can be, but I like being squishy. I know it's weird, but I do.
Do
I
you?
like being weak.
What sort of games are you playing in? Quite rules heavy, encumbrance, or is it all freeform?
At the moment, it's a bit free for all. Doesn't really matter. But the DM's brand new. It's his first campaign, so because I'm experienced, I'm kind of like helping him through a little bit with the rules because he gets mixed up and then he'll look to me and I'll go, "Oh, it's this."
Any more tips on creating characters the way that you do them?
I think just fully love what you're doing with it. Just be invested. Don't make it to make it because that's boring. And don't try and make a joke character unless you've got the experience to turn that joke into a long-term thing. I know loads of people make joke characters and think, haha, this is dead funny, I'm going to be an edgelord. And then later on in the series or the games, they're like, why did I do that? Whereas on the twist side, there's other people that have done that, and they're the most heartfelt character in the story. So it depends on who you are as a person.
Have you ever played a character that you didn't enjoy?
Yeah, I played a wild sorcerer. I didn't love that.
But did you stick it out?
Until she died, but it wasn't my fault she died.
Yeah, you're not one of those people to throw them under the bus to get rid of them.
No, absolutely not.
So what sort of campaigns have you played?
We started out at the Abyss, but that didn't work out. The DM didn't match with the group, so I've started DMing Fandelver. I did DM all of Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Interesting. What do you think? Which season did you play?
We played Xanathar. I think that's summer, isn't it? Or is he spring?
Spring.
So we did the spring season, and they really loved it. The players.
Yeah,
I personally was like, I don't know if I like this campaign, but
oh really?
I think in the second chapter it's just too open, isn't it? Or the third chapter, and I was like struggled with that at first, with obviously because I work long hours, I work big days, so trying to prep for the openness of that was a lot. Rants on the Citadel.
Oh yeah, I've got that in one of the books.
Tales of the Yawning Portal.
Yes.
And I've ran Tomb of Horrors.
Oh, rather than
the final one. We did it as a joke, I think, at Halloween because we were player down.
So anything that you're looking to play that haven't?
I really want to play Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and I would love to get my teeth into Curse of Strahd as a player, and Tomb of Annihilation another.
Yeah. So have you got any characters in mind, say for like Witchlight?
Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I have seen Fairy is in it.
Me too.
I'd love to play as a fairy.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they all should have, some special characters like that. Although I do hear that Fairy is one of the most overpowered characters you can be. I mean, comment if that's not the case, but...
I mean, I've only played as one in a one-shot, and he died, so...
Yeah,
he wasn't that powerful, but he was a barbarian, though.
A barbarian fairy. That's awesome.
Tips for character creation, again, is just put your heart into it. Make sure you're having fun with it. If you do know what campaign you're doing, speak to the DM and incorporate the DM into it if you can. Obviously, it's hard when it's a module, but games like Tyranny of Dragons have things in the back where you can incorporate player backgrounds. And that's not spoilers, that is for players to look at.
Yeah, I like Tomb of Annihilation. I think, is that the one with archaeologists and stuff like that?
Yeah, and the map reading one.
I quite like the idea that my players create the characters without knowing what they're playing. Like for Strahd, I was like, you make a character, and then I'll tell you what we're going to play. Because I didn't want
Curse of Strahd, absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. Because they're all going to say Vampire Hunters.
When you're playing something like Fandelver, I like the idea of being someone who's incorporated in the town. Like if you're playing the starter set or the Essentials kit, it would make sense for you to be someone who lived there, for example. I like the idea of that.
Do you like put a lot of weight in choosing the correct skills, or do you ever choose things that kind of doesn't make stereotypical sense and play with it like that?
Yeah, I'll do it with the character. So, for example, when I was playing as my fisherman, he was a rogue or a monk. I can't remember which. I think he was a rogue. I've never played a monk. And he had nature as one of his things, and he had survival. But he didn't have anything in stealth.
Excellent. Yes, that's more interesting to me personally. Yeah. I mean, the fisherman, like I say, that's a lot of people would not make them so underpowered. It's like it doesn't sound like the strongest character, but that's good. I appreciate that as a DM. It's more interesting.
Well, he wasn't.
So so using your fishing rod as a weapon, how do you come up with the stats for that, or is this already stats?
I use the net because the net already has stats, doesn't it? It's a martial weapon.
Right. But yeah, I like that idea. Do you ever make up weapons though like that? Then do you ever just can I use this instead?
I have done. Like if I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if I was to use a quarter, I'd use a quarterstaff as my fishing rod. Probably, I'd ask if I could do that.
Thanks for talking to me, and I wish you well in all your games.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. You too.